All right, I think this is the best I'm going to get my audio, so I'm just going to jump into it. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since I've posted anything, but it's interesting because whenever I want to really talk about a video or a movie, or whenever I get inspired to make a video, it's usually surrounding horror. So a horror movie came out a few weeks ago that everyone's been talking about. It is none other than Obsession. And wow, is it good. It's directed by Curry Barker, who I was familiar with because of his comedy sketches, believe it or not, on like Instagram and Facebook Reels. But wow, can he also direct and edit horror? Anyone who watches this channel knows I really like horror movies, especially independent horror, because it does a really good job of highlighting issues and teaching lessons that are based within the culture of the modern day. When I think back to slashers of the past, it's a lot of that stereotypical culture shock of the 80s. Don't stay out late at night. Don't party. Don't drink, or else you get slashed. And a lot of independent horror that's coming out in the past few years really highlights, generational issues surrounding the 2010s and 2020s. Issues with socialization, generational changes, and as we'll see from this movie, relationships. So I'm going to split this up into two parts today. There's going to be two topics I talk about, or maybe I'll make two videos. We'll see. Well, you'll see by the end of this video if it's two. But the first thing I want to talk about is kind of like the warning of the character Bear, right? So we see Bear as this character who's kind of like this. He's portrayed as this like nice guy character, but as soon as we watch the video, or not the video, as soon as we watch the movie, we realize that Bear is like the quintessential evil nice guy that you hear about on things like Reddit and other like horror stories on like Instagram and Facebook. And then the next thing I want to talk about is kind of the tragedy of Nikki's character, who tragically ends up losing her agency due to this concept of a wish, right? So without further ado, I'm going to try my best not to spoil the movie, but I'll give you clear warnings when spoilers are ahead. So without much further ado, I'm just going to jump into it. The warning of Bear's character. So the warning of Bear. Let's talk about the central protagonist and what warning he gives the audience from and about him. So I'm a teacher, and something that I go over a lot with my students, especially when I'm analyzing like fictional text and understanding characters' wants and needs, is I always put an emphasis on wants and needs, because I feel like it's often reflective of real life. Sometimes what we want is not necessarily what we need, and sometimes what we need doesn't necessarily stem from a place of what we want. And it's this idea of wants and needs that's heavily explored in movies, with the classic kind of monkey's paw or Genie in the Lamp Gone Wrong movies, like, well, I guess the classic story Monkey's Paw by J.J. Jacobs, something like that, from the 1900s, early 1900s. And then we have Genie's Lamp, which is a classic trope in movies that we know a lot of, like Aladdin and other things where wishes go tragically wrong, typically because the character makes the wish with semi-ill intent. And that's kind of where we get into the tragedy of Bear. It ends up going horribly wrong. So I'm going to give a little bit of spoilers for the movie. If you didn't tell from the trailers, this movie is about Bear, our central protagonist, breaking a willow's branch. I'll look it up. He breaks a willow's wish, and he asks the universe for his crush to fall madly in love with him. In fact, more in love with him than anybody else in the entire world, right? So it's very clear, especially from the beginning. There's this whole dialogue in the beginning where Bear is like intensely like revealing his feelings to the audience and his best friend. And I remember watching that monologue in the beginning, and I was like, wow, this is very intense. Like, he needs to dial it back. And I'm glad that his buddy Ian, who's another character in the story, really tells him, just ask her out for a cup of coffee, bro. Like, it's not that crazy. But yeah, no, in the beginning, his feelings very intense. It's very clear that what Bear wants to be in a relationship with Nikki. But as we watch this movie, we realize that he really doesn't know much about Nikki at all, and he's very much more. He wants this idea of a relationship with this really pretty girl who's nice, essentially, right? So when we meet Bear, he's at a very dark time in his life. His grandma recently died. He's living in her house. His cat dies, and he finds himself unable to reveal to his crush how he feels. And so when the movie begins, he starts off this really like sympathetic and kind of just pathetic character. The very first scene is him expressing this really heartfelt expression of love. And we as an audience, I mean, we root for him in the beginning. We're rooting for him to get what he wants. He wants to get the girl, and but the more we get to know this supposedly sympathetic character, the more we realize that he never really wanted his crush. He wanted the idea of someone he could be in a relationship with. And by the time the movie ends, we realize, well, okay, this would be a little bit okay, spoiler alert now. If you want to watch the movie, don't continue. But by the end of the movie, we realize that he's basically okay with dating a mindless doll that he can control, rather than continue to be alone or lose what he wants. And looking at his life, we see this very clearly, that he desperately needed to kind of like work on himself before, and he needs to be more open with his friends about like, communication and trauma. Literally, if he had this open communication in the beginning, this whole horror movie could have been avoided. In the very beginning of the movie, Nikki asks him point blank, "Do you like me?" Right? And he doesn't have the guts to communicate to her his true emotions. So yeah, there's a lot of things with Bear that go wrong. So I'm going to jump into this next portion. So I talked a little bit about the warning of Bear, but now let's talk about Bear as the villain. So in this story, Bear, our protagonist, makes a wish that his crush Nikki would fall madly in love with him, right? At first, he doesn't realize that this wish would even work. But after Nikki begins acting unlike herself, he soon realizes, oh my gosh, I did this. But instead of trying to fix it, he begins to hide what he's done to her from his friends and make excuses for Nikki, that her now estranged behavior is totally normal. And what makes Bear truly evil is the fact that Nikki is still trying to break through under Wish Nikki's command, right? And Bear knows the real Nikki is still in her body, experiencing everything, wanting nothing more to regain back her agency. But she can't. And for Bear, well, he says it himself. He says in the movie point blank, this is all he's ever wanted, and he doesn't want to lose that. He makes every excuse and hesitation not to deal with the problem because he'd rather have this fake version of Nikki supposedly look happy together with her than to be with who she really is, right? And he's obsessed with trying to make this horrible, toxic, evil situation work. And to be straightforward, he knows what he's doing is wrong. He knows he's taken away Nikki's agency by the middle of the movie, and that she is not in control. But he does it anyway because he's obsessed with this idea of being with her, right? And that leads me to the last thing I want to talk about in this video. Sorry, this is actually a shorter video than I thought. I didn't write too much on this topic today. But I wanted to talk about the tragedy of Nikki, right? So, the tragedy of Nikki. Nikki is such a tragic character because everything we know about her lets us know that, quite frankly, she's a good person and a great friend. Like, she gives money to the homeless, she cares about others, she has ambitions and passions, and is very early in the film, we see this bright person suddenly and tragically lose her agency, right? So I'm going to speak a little biblically here. Biblically, agency is something that there was like a war in heaven for, right? The ability to choose has been, since the dawn of time, something that makes us human. And it's that inability to now have that agency that creates the horror of this film, right? When someone loses their free will and ability to make choices logically, it creates this terrifying separation from self that leaves us, the audience, watching and never knowing what to expect. We see this wish and this lack of agency quite literally destroy her life throughout the course of the film. We see her have these glimpses where she's able to temporarily regain control, and she finds herself absolutely frightened and in pain. She's seeing the pain that she's causing herself and others and wishes for nothing more to be put out of her misery, which leads us to the two most tragic scenes, in my opinion, of the entire movie. The first scene is the bedroom scene, and it's in the last act of the movie. It's in the third act, where in her possessed state, Nikki is able to communicate while Wish Nikki, I'm going to call her Wish Nikki, is asleep. And he asks Bear to kill her, to which Bear responds, "What's so wrong with being with me?" And the real Nikki responds, "I've never been with you, Bear," right? So it's interesting. Even in this moment, kudos to the actress. There's so much emotion being played. But even in this moment, she doesn't like hate or blame Bear. Instead, she just wishes for the torment to end, right? Which is a kindness that Bear doesn't deserve. I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd be like, "Bear, what the heck are you doing? This is wrong." Like, just yelling at him. But she doesn't do that. Because, by this point in the movie, Bear realizes what he's doing is wrong. He's the monster, but he's blindsided by this obsession to just be with her, right? And I think that leads to the most tragic moment in the movie. It's at the very end. The most tragic moment for this character is at the end, where in the aftermath of this destruction that was forced upon her, she sits down on the couch. She's about to end it all, and she regains her agency to find herself in a room surrounded by her best friends, who are all dead by basically her own actions. The only one that wasn't her fault really was Bear, even though it was kind of, in a way. Yeah, go see the movie. I'm trying not to spoil as much as I can. I'm just kind of hitting on those talking points. But yeah, no, definitely a good movie to check out and see. So yeah, that's the tragedy of Nikki's character. The last thing I want to talk about is kind of my takeaways and rating. Overall, I think the film does a really good job of exploring horror through this forced relationship. In a time online where people are kind of over romanticizing like crazy, and everywhere you go online, you hear about things like the loneliness epidemic, right? And it seems to be at an all-time high where people have no clue how to communicate with each other. It's easy to meet these characters in the beginning and kind of relate to them in a small way. And this film does a really good job of making these characters feel like they aren't just one-off characters. This movie does a great job of making you feel like these are all flawed 20-somethings that you would know or meet at a bar or a library, right? In the very beginning, they're talking about this trivia night that happens on Wednesday, and I was like, oh my gosh, I do trivia on Wednesdays, and then right after trivia, there is karaoke. This is the average 20 midweek fun time, you know? But yeah, all right, I'll move on from that. But that was just a funny thing from the film that I thought was really, the director, the writer, such a good job making these characters really come to life and feel like real flawed people, right? Also, relationships in themselves. So relationships as this vantage point of horror, right? Relationships, let's face it, they are scary. With the act of being in a relationship, there's always this fear that you'll lose a part of yourself, right? Or in this movie, lose a part of your autonomy. And it's interesting because right after seeing this movie, I watched Marriage Story with some friends. Yeah, my whole last weekend was just spent watching movies about cursed relationships. But it was interesting because I saw Marriage Story with my friends, and there's this juxtaposition that shows Bear in this light of wanting this idea of a relationship with this beautiful and vibrant woman, instead of caring about any of Nikki's wants, needs, or desires, right? And so while I was watching Marriage Story, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, the guy from Marriage Story, he also did not think about Scarlett Johansson's, I don't remember their names, it's really bad. But Scarlett Johansson's wants or needs or desires when they got married, and that's why they're doing the whole separation. It's a cursed weekend of tragic romance that I've been watching. But yeah, no, it was interesting that in both of these movies they kind of show that, it's less of the male character, the male protagonist, thinking about their love interest wants. It's very much about their wants, right? And it's talking about kind of the warning of selfishness in relationships, right? You don't want your partner to lose their autonomy, and those of you guys who kind of dive head into relationships, you also don't want to be the one giving up all your autonomy, right? You guys are two separate people, but you guys just are working as a team now, I don't know, maybe that's my view of relationships, but I'll continue on. That's just one of my takeaways. But I also think this movie serves as a warning not to place this fantasy and desire on other people, right? I know so many people in my own life that think, if I have a boyfriend or if I have a girlfriend, then I can start my life. But it's no, you can start your life right now, and you don't need to have this idea or fantasy to be successful, to do good in the world and even be happy, right? All you need is you. And for some, maybe a therapist. I just started therapy, and I like it. It's nice to vent to a person who's unbiased and not just for your friend and family. But Yeah, no, it's something that I thought about a lot, and it kind of goes back to that one saying. There's like a quote from some old guy that's like, "Don't start talking, start doing." Right? Where it's like if you place all like your goals in life waiting for something to happen, it's never going to happen. Like you need to make moves, and you also got to be comfortable with yourself, right? All right, I'm getting sidetracked. Let me finish it. I'm gonna give the movie a rating. Overall, this movie gets a solid 9 out of 10 on the horror scale for me. Considering the budget, which was under $1 million, the director did amazing squeezing water out of a stone for this one, right? So most movies under $1 million don't look this good. Like, I'm just going to be honest. They did a fantastic job. And I wish I could say it was like squeezing water out of a stone, but you couldn't tell. Like, this movie looked like a non-independent, super high budget, like $10 million budget movie. It was less than $1 million. It was absolutely fantastic. This movie, it's super rare for any box office movie to do that, right? Make so much money back and continue to be this focal talking point. And also the lead actress for Nikki, she deserves an Oscar performance or an Oscar nomination for her performance. And if she doesn't get one, the Oscars are rigged because wow, like I know there's been a huge a huge change in Hollywood and the Oscars for now nominating and assigning awards to people in horror, actors in horror, but she did such an amazing job portraying someone who's it's hard to describe. It's almost like you're playing two and sometimes even three different people in this movie, and she did an amazing job of doing each and every one and doing a terrifying performance with it, right? So yeah, those are just my key takeaways. 9 out of 10 for me. If you're a horror fan, this is a must-see. And even if you're not a horror fan, if you can handle some bloody elements, I think this movie will surprise you. It touches on a lot of interesting topics, and I think that's why this movie is going to be so popular for a long time. It's talking about so many different things at once, and you can take so many different aspects of this movie and have a bunch of different really interesting conversations with it. And it's a movie that it runs on a really simple premise. It's that monkey's paw premise, but they did it in such an interesting way, and in a way that leaves you on the edge of your seat throughout the entire movie. This movie is also really interesting because it's an interesting type of thriller where like I felt myself have like my hands like covering my eyes, either because it was terrifying or because it was like super awkward, and it's like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next. And the director does such a great job with that. I was like, you gotta go see it. All right, that's where I'm gonna end the video here. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. I think this summer is gonna be the summer of horror. I just saw The Back Room, so I'm probably gonna do a video on that later this week. I also just The Amazing Digital Circus is coming out, and I really like that show because it reminds me so much of like I have no mouth and I must scream, right? That whole story with Pam. And I'm really excited to maybe I'll even make a video about the series, and then I'll make a video about the movie because I'm excited for that movie to come out. It's gonna be fantastic. We're in peak summer horror vibes, and I just hit my like I said earlier, I'm a teacher, so it's nice having the summer off so I can just talk about these movies. Oh my gosh, that's my cat, Bart, you good? Yeah, it's fine. All right. Well, you guys take care. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. It means the most that you guys are just here, listening to me rant about movies. So that's it. Have a good one.